let's get to it. It's another episode of A Nichols Worth, and I'm your host, Keaton Nichols. You can catch me on the interwebs at Keaton D. Nichols, especially on Instagram, where you can catch a live version of the show each and every night that we go live. All things normally happen at 8 p.m., but of course you might have noticed that we've been gone in the last week. Well, this past week, of course, I was in the great city of Philadelphia. Of course, shout out to my friend and friend of the show as well, Jovan Alfred and his wife Latoya, getting married this weekend. And get this, they allowed me to be a part of their special day as well. So how about that? Can't think of a cooler way to spend a week in Philadelphia as well. So shout out to them. Appreciate them letting me be a part of their big day. But that's where we were. We were on vacay last week. We're getting back to the news and, of course, the hard-hitting stuff again this week. We'll talk COVID tonight and not mask mandates. It used to be the thing. Vaccine mandates, which inevitably is now the thing. I'm going to need your opinion on this and whether or not you guys feel that vaccine mandates are appropriate. It does seem like we're rolling down a particular hill. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about I can't even say the baby. I hate saying the name the baby. It makes it sound like something's wrong with like my delivery or something. I don't know. But anyway, the baby, who I guess was rather at Rolling Loud this weekend, had some disparaging and not so good comments. I'm interested to see what cancel culture sort of does with this one. And I'll talk about sort of the effect of that later. But first, let's talk vaccines. Let's talk about mandates. Let me know what you think. The question that I asked to my Instagram crowd, I do see a few folks in here now on Instagram that answered this question, and I'd love to hear some explanation behind this as well. But for those of you that are watching live, do you think it's right that, employers are requiring some workers to get vaccinated before returning to work? That is the question of the day. So feel free to answer that whenever you wish. Shout out, by the way, to our sponsors, of course, Parkour Therapy. Always looking out. Make sure you check out. They are sponsoring headlines today. You can check them out at parkourtherapy.com. Got 10% off apparel when you use the promo code ANW2021. Make sure you check them out ASAP. So, of course, this past week, like I said, the big news pretty much was surrounding these headlines that were pretty much around, different groups and different demographic groups now requiring their employees or the people that frequent, those venues and whatnot to be vaccinated in some way, shape, or form. Now, I can't say that I didn't see this coming. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago right here on this very program, as a matter of fact, and how, France was, the president of France, Macron, was over there, basically sort of approving not nationwide mandates, but, sort of mandates, vaccine mandates or proof of negative test mandates for things that a lot of people would be involved in. Things like catching the train, long distance train, or going to the movie theater, or if you're a healthcare worker, it would then be mandated that you get the vaccine in France. And the question was then a couple of weeks ago, do we see that kind of thing happening here in the United States? And that's exactly what we've been seeing over the past week, right? We've been seeing different states sort of implement and roll out rules, different entities. Well, there at the bottom it says California to require state employees, healthcare workers to be vaccinated. And this is straight up and down. As the headline says, California being one of the biggest states, as a matter of fact, it might be the biggest state and most populous state in the United States, is now requiring at a statewide level that its employees, its healthcare workers be vaccinated. That's going to send ripple effects across, the rest of the industry, if you will, especially other liberal states or states that claim that they're liberal, because you got to think that California somewhat sets a standard for this kind of stuff. We've already seen this in a few other states. We also saw that the Veterans Administration, the VA, that's a federal organization, right? Not organization, it's a federal entity, I guess, if you will. It's going to now require that its healthcare workers are vaccinated. It's less, the news is less so, I think, about the variant, or I should say the sort of unrest, if you will, about this topic is less about the variant, and it's more so about this very issue, which very well may be the civil rights or whatever else like that issue of this next phase of the virus? Are we going to force people, that keeps coming back up into the rotation of questions, are we going to force people to get vaccinated? Dr. Anthony Fauci, who is, again, an expert on this kind of thing. He's the foremost expert. He's somebody who's very visual in this kind of stuff. But I think it should be said and remind people that Dr. Fauci does not hold any sort of political position, meaning he doesn't really have any power. He has a very strong, suggestive sort of power, if you will, but no real actual power. He cannot take action steps. Dr. Fauci cannot point his finger and have things be done or stopped or anything else like that. But anyway, Fauci, who we often hear from on weekends, on Sunday morning shows and things like that, has for the last several weeks kind of been saying the same sort of thing. And usually when he says something a couple of weeks later, it happens. That's just my observation. And he's been saying, look, we need to implement vaccine mandates, right? We need to require that people are vaccinated. It's no longer good enough to just say, hey, can you please go out and get vaccinated on your own? It appears that something that kind of popped up earlier on in this virus under the Trump administration, and who's to say if he is the one that originated this sort of idea, but there was this idea sort of that the vaccine, or that the virus rather, would eventually just sort of fade away. It would go away. Some believed when the weather heated up a bit and flu season didn't seem to be so obviously in vogue, if you will, that perhaps the virus would naturally sort of fade away. As that clearly became not the case, as we got closer to a year into this and the numbers didn't get any better and we got to wintertime and the numbers shot back up again, it became painfully obvious, I think, that vaccines were kind of the only way out of this, as uncomfortable as that might have made people. But the continual sort of pushback against vaccines and generally good and sound medical advice coming from the medical community, Dr. Fauci and others in the community, generally that was pushed back upon. Not just by Trump supporters, but by a lot of people that might be skeptical of what the government has to offer in terms of a solution to a problem this big and this significant. Understandable, right? In some cases, understandable. A campaign of misinformation later, and now a whole presidential administration later, and now we have this bubble of people. This bubble of people that may still be convinced of that original sort of mistruth that eventually this thing will just fade away. It'll just go away. If we wash our hands enough, or if we stay away from each other long enough, or if the weather gets warm enough, if we drink enough hydroxychloroquine, I mean, whatever sort of theories were going on out there still seem to have persisted long enough for this bubble of people to now have been formed. This bubble of people, who again, not specifically, not exclusive Trump supporters or anything, I'm not saying that, but this bubble of people that have now said, look, I will not get vaccinated. This is a particularly special and important group of people to look at, because we're talking about a group of people that is now in this country watched more than 600,000 people perish from this virus alone. 600,000 people in about a year and some change is obviously a lot. It's the leading cause of death here in the United States over the course of the last year. They've watched this happen. On top of that, they've watched a vaccination effort rolled out over the last couple of months that has caused a literal split in who this virus affects. Not a theoretical one, not a high percentage one, a literal split. 99.99999% of people who have gotten a vaccine have not gotten sick or died. I'm sorry, 99% of the people that have gotten the vaccine, have not gotten sick or died from coronavirus. 99.9, right? And 99.9% of the people that have gotten sick or died from coronavirus are unvaccinated. That is a literal split, as close as you can get to almost certainty that the thing that was killing folks at an unstoppable pace has now been stopped by this thing. And even I, who have had hesitations, of course, and might have felt uncomfortable at certain times about being vaccinated, and I am vaccinated now, I mean, even I can see that while I might have had hesitations, the evidence is there. There has been enough proof at this point that we can see what the effect of this vaccine has been thus far. So two different Americas have been created as a result of this. There's this bubble of Americans that will not get vaccinated. It's not that they cannot get vaccinated. It's not that they need the right celebrity endorsement, because I've been seeing a lot of this, right? Like I've been seeing even Republicans who were formerly spreading misinformation about the virus and the vaccine that are now even coming forward and saying, hey, actually, you know what, guys, we probably should get vaccinated. That's probably the right thing to do here. We're even at that point in the race. But I'm telling you, this is a group of people that is not waiting for the right celebrity endorsement to get vaccinated. They're not waiting to get vaccinated at all. And I think there is nothing that you can do to ask these folks nicely to say, hey, you need to get vaccinated because this is a requirement now to get rid of this virus. We cannot let this thing just fizzle out. It's not going to just fizzle out. You need to be vaccinated in order for this thing to die. There is no convincing these people and asking them to do it voluntarily. And there is one choice and one choice only. You have to force them. You have to mandate them. You have to say, we're going to take away something from you now if you are not vaccinated. You now become a part of a different part of society if you are not vaccinated anymore. That might not happen all in one kit and caboodle, but it might happen in steps like we saw over in France, right? Okay, you're not required to get the vaccine. That's fine. You just can't go to the movies. Sorry, you wanted to see that new Space Jam movie? No. Not without the vaccine. So sure, you don't have to get it, but you just can't see Space Jam in the theater. Sorry. You want to go see your grandma across town in the, Champagne region of France or something? I don't know. It's where people go on trains in France. But you want to do that? You're not vaccinated? Sorry. Got to find another way. Maybe you take your own car, rent a car, spend that money. And so it's hard for me to imagine that, I know we're seeing like healthcare workers, which I think that makes sense that healthcare workers would be required to do that. It makes sense for me. Now, I've heard from people who have responded to this question on my social, people who I've talked to, healthcare workers who I've talked to in person. And I can't say I agree with this opinion, but it's true. There are healthcare workers out there that are saying, look, I don't want to be forced to take this vaccine. Healthcare workers, people who are working most closely and intimately with people who might have coronavirus and probably do in many instances, especially if they're unvaccinated. These individuals are still saying, look, I don't want to be forced to do this. And I understand that. Everyone has their thing, right? But if there's no other way to eradicate this virus other than to get vaccinated, and there's no other way to convince the people who are unvaccinated to get vaccinated, the only other step is a mandate, a requirement for this to happen. And it just might be coming. It just might be coming. Let me know what you think in the comments section. I had a couple people answer this question about whether or not you feel it's right for employers to do this, or maybe even a better question to ask is like, what would you do if your current place of employment says, don't come back to work at all, don't expect a paycheck at all until you get vaccinated? What's going to happen then, right? We're already talking about an economy that is different because people after the pandemic have reconsidered what the importance is of their jobs and how much value they're getting from their jobs in the first place. This could help fuel that environment of people that said, you know what, I don't even want to go back to work. Forget it. You can have it. I'll go do something else. That becomes a very, very intriguing part of this whole thing. I don't know how this is going to play out in a country that has fierce and independent liberties for everybody. I just think that it will create two different Americas. And we're not the only country going through this, by the way. There are other European nations and, Asian countries as well. And I'm sure Russia and, everybody has to deal with this in some way, shape, or form. Are we going to have vaccine passports? Because that's the only way that we can ensure that large swaths of our population will remain safe. Let me know what you think in the comment section. I'll read the comments for you on the screen, just like Tracy B did on Instagram. Remember, you can follow me on Instagram at KeatonD. Nichols, she says, I work with people in healthcare who still refuse to be vaccinated, and I have spoken with individuals myself within the last Tracy, who have said as much as well, that I don't want to be forced to do this, and despite the fact that I work in healthcare. Now, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there are people listening right now that work in healthcare. I don't necessarily understand that per se. I don't know. that doesn't always equate to me. That someone who works in healthcare, I would think, and I can't assume, but I would be more sensitive to that kind of thing, understanding that a vaccine just may be the only way to protect yourself against against this particular virus. I don't know. I just don't understand that concept. But anyway, let me know. Like I said, if you're somebody out there that works in healthcare, or you know some of the reasoning behind this, I'd love to know. No shade. Gregory Wright is listening in on the YouTube. Appreciate that, Gregory. He says, go get vaccinated. It's totally safe. I agree, Greg. It is entirely safe. I think it has been shown time and time again. I was listening to a report a little bit earlier that said some of the hesitation might be on the legal classification of how these vaccines are right now. They're in emergency use right now. So can a vaccine that's under emergency use authorization, if you will, can employers still force their employees, if you will, to still get vaccinated? I don't know. I see a lot of legal mumbo jumbo, as they like to call it, coming down from that as well. Like they're setting up a situation that could be pretty serious from the legal perspective, at least. And also this was an interesting nugget that we saw on ESPN and a number of other outlets reporting this too, that the NFL is to fine unvaccinated players more than $14,000 for any violation of COVID-19 protocol. This being an example of how things might work in the sports world, that we rushed to get these things back. We came in and we said, look, we need sports to be a part of our society and what we do. The NFL is now saying, look, anyone that's unvaccinated is going to be fined. They're kicking coaches out left and right for not, getting vaccinated, or refusing to get vaccinated, creating another sort of divide line, a split line, if you will. And depending on how far other leagues and other large entities like this are willing to go, then you may have some severe backlash from people that are going to want to embrace their own individual liberties over the safety of other people, if you will. I don't think there's ever going to be a time when, the people who are unconvinced now are going to be convinced. I don't think there's a time, or I don't think there's a study that you can do. I don't think there's numbers that you can throw at the remaining individuals to say, here's evidence as to why you should get vaccinated. I know you're holding out, but this is a good reason to go get vaccinated. I don't think that happens. But hit me up. Let me know what you think. Are they safe? Are you down with it? Are you okay with companies mandating this to happen? So I'm going to take a quick break. We'll talk about DaBaby on the other side of this. Oh, so looking forward to that as well. So make sure you hit me up. Let me know what you think. We'll be right back after this.
Wake up. Look in the mirror. Tell me what you see. It's you. Only you can decide to forget about yesterday's failures and focus on today and tomorrow's success. We all share the same 24 hours. Your dreams won't chase you. Chase your dreams. Don't allow the world to run you. Run the world. Don't talk about the ladder. Climb it. Don't dip your toe into the pool. Dive in. That's the only way you'll learn how to swim. It all starts with you. And in the end, only you can change you.
Welcome back. It is Keaton D. Nichols, at Keaton D. Nichols, of course, on social media. Very easy to follow along. Appreciate my folks on Instagram, joining live, and on the replay. And again, once make sure you check out parkourtherapy.com for more information. Of course, on how you can get 10% off. You just use promo code ANW2021. All right, hit me up. Let me know what you think in the comment section. I was just saying over that quick break on IG that if there are healthcare workers that are out there, not just nurses and not just rather doctors and things like that, but nurses and other people that work kind of around this situation, healthcare workers that would have some sort of hesitancy about getting the vaccine, I think that's important to hear about. I would want to hear that person's opinion. I might not necessarily agree on the surface, but what do I know? I don't work in healthcare. But if you do, most certainly hit me up. All right, story that I normally don't dive into these kind of things because I'm not really huge on celebrity endorsement or anything else like that. But this headline sort of caught my eye over the weekend at the concert Rolling Loud, which I believe happens in Miami. But we got this headline coming out of Hot New Hip Hop, HNHH.com. The baby earns backlash after spewing homophobic hate at Rolling Loud. Made some pretty disparaging comments at Rolling Loud, homophobic comments at Rolling Loud, also disparaging comments involving those with HIV/AIDS as well. I'm not really sure where the comment happened. I'm not going to play the video here. I don't think it's necessarily required as a part of understanding this conversation, but you can check it out. Certainly, there's plenty of videos of this. Now, Rolling Loud, of course, a big concert. Everybody getting back together this year after COVID, and it's kind of a big deal for these kinds of things. All the biggest names are there at this outdoor festival. People are having a good time and all this other stuff. And this line sort of comes out, and it reminded me, again, like, every once in a while we come around to this sort of thing when a celebrity or a high-ranking member of society, let's say, says something like this, somebody that's generally well-liked in the celebrity realm of things, usually an artist or an athlete, something like this. When this kind of thing happens, the people have now moved, in recent years at least, have moved to sort of go into sort of cancellation mode. Like we gotta start canceling this guy. Can't believe he said that, right? Like, that was so inappropriate. That's very offensive. We can't allow that behavior. We can't allow that language, if you will, to continue to kind of spur on in the public. And I've been a part of that brigade that has, asked, us to sort of challenge, and push back against people whenever they do this, whether they're celebrities or not, whether it's a celebrity or some person that you work with, across the hall. The more that you foster an environment, the more an environment is allowed to fester, if you will, is the proper term there. Fester, the worse it kind of gets, kind of like the Delta variant that we talked about earlier. But anyway, the longer that kind of is allowed to be a thing in culture, the worse it gets. I truly do believe that. And so recent years, this idea of cancel culture has actually, I think, been very beneficial, but not at actually canceling anybody. Because I think sometimes that's kind of the idea of when something like this happens, that the baby, or whatever celebrity is involved here now has to be put on some sort of social timeout, if you will. That we shouldn't buy their music. They shouldn't be participating in, public events that, maybe earn this artist or this entertainer or this athlete or whatever a check. Those things, those opportunities should be limited to that person because of said event. That's the understanding of cancellation, right? Like, we should cancel this person. I don't think that's going to happen here with the baby, if you will, because the algorithm, if you will, on cancel culture is still a little bit, I don't know. It hasn't exactly been perfected just yet. We haven't figured out, like, how we cancel somebody, who we should cancel, the level of cancelization, how that works as a society, how we control that cancelization, because it hasn't always worked the way that we've wanted it to. Cases in point being people like R. Kelly, for example, who, I don't know, even before cancel culture, quote unquote, was known as a term, if you will, more recently, we've been trying to cancel R. Kelly, and it seemingly has kind of the opposite effect. We've seen that every single time that we try and cancel R. Kelly as a society, there seems to be this like group of gremlins or something that like pops up from the ground and is like, no, we will forever listen to R. Kelly's music and defend him, or whatever else like that goes on. There are some individuals that are almost, sort of cancel proof in that same sort of way. I kind of saw, Bill Cosby kind of like that too, but some other names, Kanye West most recently, he's got this album coming out, right? And he's now going around the country dressed in like, I don't know, is that a stocking he's wearing on his head? I'm not really sure what's going on there. But anyway, Kanye West is back into the limelight now as this intriguing, provocative figure whose music we cannot wait to hear. And it's like, wait a minute, there was a cancellation effort for this guy for his political views and some of the things that he said related to, history here in the United States and his political alignments. There was an attempt to cancel Kanye. It didn't really help. Didn't really work, right? It kind of had the opposite effect, right? A couple of months later, we're hearing about Kanye West being, this billionaire and this influential figure and, everything else like that Kanye kind of did it right. And Trump. I mean, we tried to cancel Trump. We saw what happened with that. But anyway, there's a lot of people that kind of fear this cancelization or this canceling algorithm, if you will. Especially conservatives that kind of try and use this as an excuse to defend themselves against problematic behavior, if you will. And what DaBaby did here over the weekend, make no mistake, was most certainly in that category of problematic behavior. There really is no defending the comments that were made. There's no defending being homophobic, either in public or in private. There is no defense for that. But what we won't do, because what we saw here too, we saw another entertainer, T.I., step in, and we know T.I.'s politics on things, especially of this sort, have been shaky at best. That's the best word I can come up with. But anyway, you have another individual, T.I., come forward and say, hey, I'm defending DaBaby's comments. I'm defending what he said. He's allowed to be homophobic. If we're allowed to have people be homosexuals in public, then he's allowed to be homophobic, right? In so many words, that's what T.I. says in response to this. And it reminded me, look, we're never going to change the minds of each individual. We're never going to say to each individual person, look, you need to be more accepting of this lifestyle because it's the right thing to do. It's how we become better as a society. That may be the right thing. That may be the correct thing to say or to feel, to think, but you're never going to be able to convince everybody of that. The most effective part, if you will, of cancel culture has not been changing the minds of individuals who might speak up or might spew something on social media about this and give the perception maybe that opinions are wider than what they are. I think the biggest effect of cancel culture has been that when something like this happens, it no longer just goes by the wayside. It no longer just gets deposited in the trash can or just appears as a blurb in the New York Post and goes away. People are challenging this at every single step. And yes, maybe DaBaby does lose some fans here. Maybe he does lose some opportunities in the next couple of weeks or months with some sponsorships, and maybe he loses out on some money because of these comments. And I guess you can consider that somewhat of a cancellation. But the very idea that this is a big deal, that we are talking about this, that we are saying, hey, he shouldn't say these kinds of things. He should apologize. Whether or not he actually apologizes or not is totally up to him. Whether or not the people around him see that as a problem are totally up to them. But if the society standard is to at least challenge the behavior that we now identify as homophobic or racist or sexist or any of these other things, if that's at least the standard to challenge those things, then yes, we are making progress. Not maybe as fast as I would like, but we are making progress on this kind of thing. But let's not listen to too many of the trolls online. It becomes very easy to fall into that trap, the way that our social media society is sort of built and set up. The idea of cancel culture is not about trying to change every troll's mind. It's about setting a standard where this is no longer acceptable. And I think that over time is what helps change the culture of a country and change the expectations as we move into the future, as we are beginning to move off of what prior generations have sort of established, what older generations, if you will, have established as a way of living. There's so oftentimes when we have conversations about whatever, happening in the past, 80, 90, 100 years ago. And the excuse always comes up, well, that was just the way that it was back then. That was just the way of the times. That's how people were back then. We talk about it so casually, as though to say there was nothing that could have stopped that from happening, not because of the individual decisions. There was nothing that could have stopped that from happening because that was the generally accepted thing to do. It was the expectation of what it was. And so if we can't get to the point where cancel culture is literally removing people from the situation of which, they found success or whatever, if that's not actually working, let's take pride in the idea that the culture is no longer to allow this stuff to go on undiscussed and unchallenged. Some people might call it snowflake culture, or that, we're being sensitive about things, X, Y, and Z. That's fine. People don't like change, and people love nicknames to things. But whenever I see something like this, I love the idea that we are challenging this, constantly challenging this and questioning this for ourselves. Not allowing us to be settled, or not allowing our minds, to settle, on the idea of very disturbing things being allowed in public. So shout out to all the people that continue to do that. There's a lot of people online that work to do that and to spread that information. And sometimes it's heavy information. Sometimes it's easy to get bogged down in things as well. Anyhow, let's look at one more comment that we had regarding the vaccine. Of course, Tavon T. Keeps It Fit Parker commenting in. Appreciate him listening. He says they force flu shots, but that's, approved by the FDA. Why can't they just wait until, it's approved? I think that approval is coming very soon. I do think that FDA approval is coming very soon. And I do think that could be a legal line that this is sort of fought upon. Like, okay, am I mandated? Do I have to? Are you saying that I had a job before, right? And I didn't do anything to lose that job, but I may now potentially lose that job because I am being forced to take a vaccine that is not FDA, not fully, if you will, FDA approved. These are approved under emergency usage. These have been, used, if you will, millions and millions and millions of times without major incident. So there is a live case study, if you will, going on, but it's still not FDA approved, right? Once the FDA puts their stamp on it, boom. Now there's, some idea of liability there and some idea of responsibility. So maybe that turns the tide there. Maybe that's the legal challenge that sort of stiffens, if you will, as we get later on in the year, and we say to ourselves, like, how are we going to force the rest of these people, if you will? How are we going to make the rest of these people, take the vaccine? That just may be one way. Or, like I said, what's I think more likely to happen is that you just have the creation of two different societies. The people that don't want to get vaccinated are going to have to live in a country that is going to feel and look different than those that are vaccinated. I think that's the inevitable conclusion that we come to either way. Either way. Anyway, let me know if you're watching this on the replay. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Love to hear from you all. We'll be live all this week at 8 p.m. here on a Nichols Worth as well. So make sure you check me out. Facebook.com/a is a great place to catch up on the episodes that you missed here, the visual version, if you will. You can check me out on Instagram at Keaton D. Nichols. That's at Keaton D. Nichols, where you can also check out a live version of the show. And on Twitch, where you can get some great advice on some video games and some other stuff that I do in that world as well. Follow A. Nichols Worth. That's A. Nichols Worth on Twitch right now. And YouTube as well. All right, so I'll see everybody tomorrow at 8 p.m. for another fresh edition of A Nichols Worth. Everybody take care.